What's good, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Celtics Chronicle podcast. As usual, I'm your boy Adam Taylor. You can find me over at SB Nation, USA Today, and the Celtics Chronicle newsletter. Links in the description below. Sign up. It's free. Or if you want to go paid, go paid. I'm joined by my homie, compadre, co-host in crime, Mr. Tim Sheils from formerly CLNS Media and now with Celtics blogger SB Nation. What's poppin', Tim?
Not much, dude. I don't know about you. I don't know how it is overseas right now,
Hot
but
as fuck.
we are hitting a heat wave, man.
Mhm.
It's going to be like 90 or 91. We got like heat advisory, so not looking forward to that. But outside of that, I'm doing pretty good.
Yeah, dude, it's warm as hell here, dude. It's been in like high 80s, low 90s every day all week. I'm just sitting in a jersey dying.
Melting.
Yep. But you know what's not hot right now? You know what's ice cold, baby? Like a vanilla ice cold. Even that song's just ice cold these days. Jayson Tatum shooting from the perimeter. Perimeter shooting only. Please do not come for me. He can still score around the rim, can still hit them middies. It's still a post threat. But that perimeter shot has been a problem for the majority of the season. Now, I'm going to put out like a little disclaimer here. I'm not the guy that's going to be like, well, Tatum's not shooting well, so Tatum's trash. That's not how I view basketball. That's not how I view player development or anything like that. He brings so much other stuff to the table that he's still an elite guy. Like, he's one of the best in the world. He's an elite screener. He's an elite defender, like a secondary defender as a help defender. High-level pick-and-roll playmaker, can get to the rim at will, one of the best post scorers. We can just go through a list of what he's great at. But the one thing that everybody's talking about right now, and I think it's more pertinent because it's happening with Team USA as well, right? Like, Celtics fans are kind of used to this. For Team USA, this is new. Is Tatum's really struggling from three-point range, and that's off the dribble and off the catch. Celtics fans have kind of seen this all year where the three-point shot just hasn't really been there, especially off the dribble. That off the dribble pull-up too hasn't really been there since the end of 2022. Like before, like that Miami Heat series was where it started to go down, and it just never kind of come back on the other side of that bell curve yet. So that we've got some numbers here. Someone posted them on Reddit. I'm trying to find out who posted them so I can credit them. So I'm going to keep looking for that while you just give your take.
Yeah, I think at this point in time, it's not entirely surprising to see Tatum struggling from deep. We've kind of seen this fluctuation with him. And to an extent, you sort of see it, on a calendar year basis where there's certain chunks of the season where he's not shooting well or not hot or taking a long time to get going and then finally getting going and then hitting a stretch of the season where he's playing well, he's shooting well, the numbers look good. And then you started to see it tail off. And in the postseason, it was definitely a thing where it wasn't consistently there. It's not by any means, I think, an indicator of anything else outside of hot shooting. I mean, do we think there's a hitch in the shot? Do we think there's something wrong with his wrist? He always tapes his fingers, so I don't think it's that, but maybe it's something like that. Or maybe at this point in time, maybe it's tired legs because he just doesn't take time off. And so I'm interested if the Celtics can try and get to the root of the problem there, or if it's something that him and Drew Hanlon can put their heads together and figure out a solution on. I really am curious as to see if I'm hoping that it's not anything injury related, because I know for a fact that they've had specialists talking about his wrist before. There's never been any, surgery or anything like that, but I'm hoping it's not something like that where it's a long-term injury that's going to need to be addressed later. But it is a little bit worrisome because now we're looking at, a year's worth of trend where there's not any shots falling down the way they used to, and he doesn't have that in his tool belt as much as he used to anymore. It's not reliable with that pull-up three in transition or anything like that. So I'm interested to see what the numbers say, though.
Yeah, so we've got these Tommy Points for Days from Reddit shared this. Credit to Tommy Points for Days. If you're watching on YouTube or you're watching on Spotify, you should be able to see this up on the screen now. So Tatum shot from, these are all 3-point numbers as well, so please just keep that in mind when I'm going through. We'll go month by month first. In October, Tatum shot 37% from deep. November, 35.9%. December, 32.4%. Big jump in January, 40.4%. And then it started to regress again. February, 35.1%. And then another big jump in March, 45.9%. Since March, he's shot 27.9%, going 51 of 83. He went 32.4% in April, shot 29% again in the Miami series, the first series in the East, 27.3% against Cleveland in the Eastern semis. Against Indy, he kind of jumped up to 30.6% in the conference finals, and then in the NBA finals, 26.3%, averaging out at 27.9, which is drastically below the league average. Since he's been away with Team USA, including the exhibition games, like the showcase games, he's 0-7, hasn't scored once from the perimeter, and that's a shorter 3-point line as well. And that can mess you up a little bit because your range is off, your line of sight's changed. But overall, it's been a poor shooting year for Tatum. And if you remember coming into the season, he did say like he'd elected against having surgery on that wrist. That wrist has been bothering him since that Miami series in 2022, probably before that, with that non-displaced fracture that he spoke about. That's why his wrist is always taped. Whether that's playing, I don't think so. Like if it was hurting or if it was really hampering him, he would have sat out, because why risk the back end of your career for now when you're not performing well? I think it's just he's been forced to adapt his game to be so good at so many things. Right. When you catch the ball, we're not just asking you to score now. So your body positioning is a bit different. The way your head's working is a bit different because you're processing the game at a higher level. You're reading the floor. Maybe that's taken away a little bit from just the fluidity of getting into his shot. After dribble's been horrendous for about 18 months. If you go to Twitter, search my handle with Tatum after dribble, the numbers are rough all through. Catch and shoot's been a bit better, as it should be. You just catch, you're in rhythm, you let it go. How often is Tatum getting a catch and shoot jumper? Maybe 2 times a game. Not enough for it to be a big sample size on a nightly basis. You need to look at it as a whole season and extrapolate. So I am concerned about this 3-point shot. I do think that when you look at everything else Tatum brings to the table, it's not the be-all and end-all as like, oh, well, if he can't score from deep, he's not a top 10 guy. No, he does too much else. But considering he came into the NBA as a pure scorer, as a free-level just menace that could score from anywhere, get hot from free, and just go like 5 of 7 in the blink of an eye, to what we're seeing now, there has been a big change, man. And I can't put my finger on what's caused it or why, or whether it'll bounce back. Like, that's the question you got to have. Like, is it going to bounce back eventually?
And I think part of it has to do with the fact that he muscled up, right? Like he put a lot of weight on his frame, and based on how he's tacked, especially in like the postseason too, where he was getting to the basket, finishing through contact, finishing strong, like finding any way to score inside. His frame is what makes some of that possible. So like there's a little bit of a trade-off there. And I don't know long term if it's something that they're going to look at in terms of its training regimen, if he's going to try and slip down a little bit, or if it's just something that he needs to work through as he's put on this muscle. Like how does he need to adapt his shot in order to get it off the way that he wants it to? And I think some of it has to be, to an extent, has to be exhaustion, right? Because he doesn't take off a lot of games. You know, there could be tired legs going into that, factoring into that equation. But it is definitely concerning. And I think it'd be different if it were, if he was bottoming out at like 34 or 35%, and that's kind of what his floor was, you could live with that for sure. And when he's on, as we saw, there was a couple months there where he was just taking off. If you're shooting over 40% and you're a top offensive option on a team, that's big. The fact that he's able to get to the line and get to the paint and gets buckets that way too, alleviates the need to have the 3-point shot. But the fact is that it used to be such a massive part of his game, and now it's becoming less so because he's not hitting those looks. Now, does Tatum look at this in the offseason? Do the Celtics try and look at stuff? I don't know what they can do to kind of alleviate that. And I think that's really honestly the most frustrating part about it. Like how much of this is just physical changes in his body that he's made that have made that shot, not what it used to be. Because that 3-point shot, like you said, was lethal. That was in the tool belt and was consistently used. And now it feels less so. And I wonder if that trade-off is worth it. For the most part, I think it is, based on how he was able to get to the hoop. And you saw how much he was able to impact games just by simply just driving and going through guys. If he tries to change up his regimen, I don't know if he's as effective there or what that means long run. But It's mind-boggling because it's so weird. It just fluctuates like that so much.
I think for me, it's when you look at what you mentioned about the off season, right, and whether or not he's going to work on this 3-point shot in the off season. The biggest question for me right now is how. Right, you're away for the Olympics. When you finish the Olympics, it's going to be all about relaxing, resting, getting ready for training camp. Then it's going to be into training camp. You're not going to want to put much more mileage on Tatum's legs because it's just not going to work for him. As you said, he's already barely resting. So you can't expect him to come out of the Olympics and then flow into a coaching session with Hanlon and with the Celtics coaching staff trying to fix this shot because he needs to rest. Because he's just come off the longest run in terms of what you can have in an NBA season, making it all the way to the finals, gone straight into the Olympics. The dude needs a couple of weeks to rest before going into training camp. So it's really tough. And you have to look at it like that and then be like, well, is this an issue he's going to face all next year because he's not going to have the available time to put it right this summer? Or is, as you said, is it something to do with just it's the way his body's changed and he's just working through some mechanical aspects? Maybe his elbow doesn't sit where it used to. Maybe his shooting pocket's slightly changed because he's bigger. So maybe it needs to come out a bit more on the catch. Maybe it's just a slump. But an 18-month slump is a trend rather than a slump at that point, and it starts to become concerning. I don't know how they fix it. I don't think they've got time to fix it this summer. I don't even know if it needs fixing or if it just needs working through. You know what I'm saying? What I will say is, like you mentioned, like you were saying, it was such a big part of his game. I do think that the shots that he's getting now are coming differently. It's a different system completely. He's not being able to ISO as much because the ball moves a lot more. The players move a lot more. That he's coming off of screens with the ball, catching, seeing two guys kicking it out, relocating, and then having to try and shoot over a bigger defender. So those shots don't come the same way as they used to. That might be affecting him because he's not just in his comfort zone. And sometimes you just need to learn to deal with the amount of pressure that's being put on you. And this slump does coincide with him really stepping forward as that number one option, right? Like, especially this year without Marcus Smart to team up and find him in his right spot. The season before where him and Jalen had really evolved into this 1A and 1B option. It just feels like there's a little bit more pressure on his shoulders. The shots don't come the same way. And he's just working through some shit. The problem is that 18 months is a long time to be working through some shit with no reward.
Yeah, and that's kind of where the frustration really comes in. I think for most Celtics fans when they look at that situation, because it's so big at this point that it's impossible to ignore. And it's happening now at an international level going against some of the best talent. So I'm hoping it's something that they can kind of figure out. I don't know how much they can really do. And again, this is the frustrating part about him playing for the Olympics. And all the more reason it's frustrating when you look at the Steve Kerr situation where, you know, he's starting one game, starts this game against South Sudan that happened the other night. And then before that, he was a DMP. So it's like, does he really need to be there? Is it better off for him to be resting and getting this rest going into the offseason? Like, I am happy to see Celtics well represented on the Olympic squad. But if it's going to hurt him in the season, that's where I have issues with it. Like, and the 3-point shot is something that I worry about because when you see drop off with 3-point shot, it's usually tired legs or what have you. So those are just things that I think about. And I don't know, maybe it's an overreaction, but again, like you said, we're talking about 18 months of just up and down fluctuation where there's really been no consistent through line with that shot.
And that's the problem, right? For me, it's you either adjust what your expectations are for him and you're like, right, we don't expect him to be this 3-point shooter and we don't expect him to be like the main perimeter offense because he creates so much and does so much else, right? Or we keep the expectations and then we're like, yo, this is what we need in terms of. Sorry, someone's just texted me, it made me laugh. This is what we need in terms of we just need you to be on the ball and be a creator. We need you to do X, Y, and Z as a screener, as a driving kick guy working out of the post. You need to make your choice about which way you want to go and what your expectations are. And then just focus on that. Because if you're like, well, we need Tatum to be this complete version, the version that we saw this past year that dominated across the board, then holding him to a high standard on the perimeter is kind of messed up because he's doing so much else for you And he's such an integral part of the team. He's arguably one of the most complete players in the entire world. Oh, so he's hitting 33% from deep. All right, then. Yeah, it sucks. He's meant to be this pure scoring Kevin Durant-esque type guy, but he's giving you LeBron-esque type control of a game. He's not as physically imposing, but I'm on about just in terms of being a complete package. If you want him to be a pure scorer, that's fine, but then carries the load, right? I don't know what, like this, and this is what I was getting at earlier. This slump or this downward trend directly correlates to him taking on more on-ball duty as a creator, as an off-ball screen guy. Everything else that he does, he took that role on, and the shooting started to slump, right? And there is a direct correlation there. Part of me is okay with that personally. I'm okay with your shooting taking a drop if you give us so much else over here, right? If you don't, then I'm going to need your shooting to be okay. But I do understand why it's frustrating, especially in Team USA, especially for fans that hear all this amazing stuff about Tatum, where all you ever hear is Tatum's a top 5 guy, top 10 guy, MVP candidate, who led the Celtics to a championship. And then he comes to Team USA and everyone else is like, oh, I don't get to watch much Celtics. Oh, Tatum's gone over for 70. He's 0% from the perimeter. Who is this dude? I thought he was meant to be like... And you can see why the discourse occurs, because you hear one thing, you see another. And part of that's on Steve Kerr, because Tatum's role's not really conducive to getting the best out of him. But he's also struggling to fit into that just spot-up shooter role. So there's issues on both sides. But I do think that, you know, expectations need to be adjusted. It's been 18 months. It's going to be a while until it gets figured out. Like we said, it's not going to be this summer unless he works on it during training camp with the coaches. I'm hoping, personally, that spending the summer with Durant, spending it with Steph, they're going to look at, he's going to be like, yo, my shot's not working. How are you guys handling it when you're having to come off and there's 2 guys? You can learn from your peers, right? So if there was ever any chance of him figuring this stuff out, he's with the right type of crowd right now to try and figure it out. But if not, he's still a top 10 guy. Like, okay, his perimeter shot's not great. Guess what? There's about 6 other dudes on the Celtics that are going to nail 40% through the year. I'm feeling quite confident.
Yeah, and he's going to be the one who's going to be setting the table for them most of the time, too. So that's the trade-off, is you've got a guy who can do a little bit of everything else on offense. And playing that bigger role, if it means that the 3-point number drops, as long as they're winning, I can live with it.
I mean, though, all I'm saying is I'm not going to be on the timeline being like, yo, Tatum sucks. And that's bothering me a lot because of what bothers me the most is scoring isn't the only thing that goes into winning a basketball game. I get it's the easiest.
It's a reductive argument. Yeah.
I get it's the easiest thing to follow. Oh, the ball went in the basket. Who put it there? Basically. Oh, let me load up a box score points. But points doesn't correlate to impact. You cannot be a Celtics fan, and it's not really Celtics fans who are having this problem right now. But you cannot be a Celtics fan and talk about not scoring and not making an impact when you have someone like Al Horford that impacts the game. When you were championing for Marcus Smart, that couldn't score in his early years, but he made winning plays. Well, that's making an impact without scoring. So why is it okay for when he does it or when Horford does it, but when Tatum makes an impact without scoring, he's trash? Because he's making an impact on a completely different realm of, you know what I mean, of talent level, with so much extra defensive, attention coming at him, and he's thriving. So yeah, I get it. It's frustrating, but I'm not about to start like shitting on the dude for it at all.
Amen to that. I don't know if I have much else to add.
Be nicer to Tatum. Enjoy the Olympics.
Please.
We'll be back soon. Oh, by the way, if you're new here, hit subscribe. We like you. Bye.
Please.